Hi, my name is Marcel and I would like to share with you how I made my electronic drum kit and how you could be making your own electronic drum kit. This is the line I used in each of the videos in a 10-part series that I made 10 years ago. The last few months, this series has gotten more hits than it got in the 9 years before that. Also, my number of subscriptions quadrupled. It seems people want to know more about my kit. So it makes sense now to share with you what has changed in my drum kit since I made these 10 videos and why I made these changes. A lot of things are the same, so most of the changes I made can be called updates. Some of them will be interesting to all drummers, but some details might only be of interest to electronic drum nerds. So to try and keep all of you aboard, I will put the details that might bore the average drummer in a frame with this logo. Nerds can pause the video and read the text, others might want to move on to the next chapter in this video. Because there's a lot to show and explain, I plan to make a few update videos. In this video I will show you the changes in the drum kit hardware. In part 12 I will go into electronics and the Roland TD50X module in particular. In a few months I would like to make another video about my software, which should be part 13. Next year I hope to make a video about lighting. But for now, let's look at the drum kit itself. I made my first drum kit in the end of the 80s. I was a big fan of symmetry and it didn't make sense to me to have pretty much all of the elements to my right side. So I created a drum kit that was centered around 9 pads that were placed in 3 triangles. Including cymbals and foot pads, over the years my kit has had on average 20 components. A few years ago I made my current kit smaller. It is now a 16-piece drum kit. The first thing that will stand out, I bought a few Roland mesh pads. The reason is that these pads have a better bounce compared to my rubber pads. First I bought a Roland pad to be used as a snare. I chose the PDX 100 because I prefer a 10-inch size over 12 or 14 inches. A few years later I bought two PD85 pads and I use these mainly for hi-hat sounds. As you can see, I still do not use a dedicated hi-hat set. I have always played hi-hat on pads. I do however use a hi-hat pedal, which I will discuss later on. The latest change in pads is that I removed the outer two pads from my drum kit. So currently I use 4 10-inch size rubber pads, 2 6-inch rubber pads and 3 Roland mesh head pads. The rubber pads are the ones that I made myself. In the last few years the foam layers have perished, so I had to replace the foam. Also the playing surfaces needed to be replaced. I found a material that is used as carpet underlay. That feels a bit less bouncy compared to the neoprene I used 10 years ago, but it is less expensive. The overall design of the pads remained the same. If you want to see how I made these pads, check out part 4 of this video series. My older videos will confirm that I have experimented a lot with self-made cymbals. I wanted my crash cymbals to bounce to show the audience when they are hit, but the thinner cymbals always broke down in a few months. When I made them thicker, they did not bounce enough, so I did not find a good compromise between bouncing and durability. A few years back I got sick of that struggle and I bought a series of Roland cymbals. I now use two CI8 as crashes, a CI12C as a china and a CI13R as a ride cymbal. That is when I play rock music. When I play electronic music, I often use the two larger cymbals for electronic sounds or loops. I understand that many drummers prefer larger cymbals, especially for the ride. But I like my kit to be compact, so I don't really care for large size cymbals or pads. As I explained, I do not believe it's logical to have pretty much all of the elements of a drum kit to your right side, simply because that is how drummers have always played. Likewise, if you play electronic drums, there is no need to play a hi-hat setup where the foot and hand are aligned vertically. Why would you want to cross your arms to play hi-hat? So I have never played a traditional hi-hat on an electronic kit, but I have used hi-hat switches and pedals through the years. About 10 years ago, my drum kit had 4 trigger pedals, and in some years I had a hi-hat pedal and in other years I did not. At one time I used 5 pedals, 4 trigger pedals and a hi-hat pedal. Just as I have taken out 2 pads, I have also taken out 1 trigger pedal. I currently have 2 pedals on either side, but on the left side the left pedal is a Roland FD7. In rock music I use the FD7 as a hi-hat pedal, as it is intended, but in electronic music I often use the hi-hat pedal to trigger a single sound, like a hand clap or a tambourine. If you want to see how I made my foot pads, check out part 5 of this video series. In the TD50X you can assign control functions to 2 pads and 2 foot switches. The functions that are used most often are kit increment decrement and all sound off. I prefer to advance to other sets by hitting a pad, but for all sound off I prefer to use a foot switch. Earlier this year I recorded a few YouTube videos in which I needed a foot switch to mute all sounds. For those occasions I placed a switch in the middle, but recently I bought 2 foot switches that I have incorporated in my drum kit permanently. The foot switches are momentary switches. The one that I use to mute all sounds, for example at the end of the song, is the one on the right. I chose this position because I do not need to mute sounds while I'm playing a groove. So when I want to mute all sounds, I can remove my right foot from the kick pedal and press the foot switch. The other foot switch is placed on the left side. I can press this one with my left foot. That means that I can press this foot switch while playing a groove. I may move this one to the middle though, time will tell. Like many other drum modules, the TD50X module has a single foot switch connector, but it is a stereo input, so you could use a double switch like the Boss FS6. But I prefer to place one switch at either side. If you need to, you can easily use an I-splitter to connect 2 mono switches into a stereo foot switch input. As you may have guessed, the signals from my foot switches run through my multi-cable together with the cables from the pads and cymbals. Whenever I changed my kit in the past 10 years, that often meant I had to change the multi-cable. As you might have seen in all the videos, the connector I use has a large amount of pins, 72. If you are thinking about creating a multi-cable, think about the future. You might want to increase the number of pads or add switches, lights, etc. Changing pins in a cable like this is not an easy task, but having to start all over again, that would take even more time. So think long and hard before you choose the amount of pins and the type of connector. In this picture you can see I have added a few cables on the left side that I'm not using today but might use in the future. As I mentioned before, my current drum kit holds 16 pads and cymbals, excluding the hi-hat pedal. Since my current module has only 14 pad inputs, I can't connect each pad to a separate input. But since some of my components are mono pads, there is a solution. About mono and stereo, in the old days all electronic drum pads were mono. After their introduction of drum pads and cymbals with a second sound on the rim or edge, most pads now have stereo connectors. If you have a number of mono pads, you can combine them using splitter cables or insert cables. In theory, a splitter cable enables you to connect 2 mono pads to one stereo trigger input. In the module, you can assign one sound to the head of the pad and another sound to the rim of the pad. You could then play the 2 sounds on the 2 mono pads. Whether this theoretical option is available to you depends on the type of module and the type of input. Generally, you can split a stereo input if it is designed for 2 piezos. There's a great Wikipedia page on V-drums. You could use that to check how many inputs of your module are designed for use with two piezos. As for creating your own splitter cable, you can find videos on YouTube. Search for something like "make a drum splitter cable." Well, I do not have a lot to tell you about the rack. To me, the purpose of the rack is to keep the pads in position and to guide the cables to the module. I still use the same metal rack and the same metal clamps, but due to the fact that I currently drive a car that is not a station wagon, I had to make the rack and fly case a bit smaller. That means I had to remove the two diagonal pipes. The curved rack is currently only standing on three legs. These diagonal pipes not only gave the rack some sturdiness, but it also made the rack look a bit cooler, if I may say so. If I were to make a new kit in the future, I would probably make the rack bigger again and buy a bigger car. If you want to see how I made this rack, check out part 6 of this video series. In the past decades, I've always used 2 or sometimes even 3 different drum modules. In part 8 of this series you can see an equipment flight case with 2 modules, a Roland TD8 and an Alesis D4. A few years later I used a Roland TD20 in combination with a Roland TM2. Currently I use a single drum module, the Roland TD50X. I will explain why I have been using 2 modules for all these years and my thoughts on downsizing to a single drum module in the next video, part 12 of this series. In part 8 you also saw a netbook running my own software. It has been replaced by a Windows tablet, currently a Microsoft Surface Pro 6. In that video you also saw an analog mixer, which I replaced with a digital mixer, a Mackie DL806. As you might have seen in other videos, this mixer is no longer in my equipment flight case. The reason is that I only use this mixer at home. I do not need it during gigs. Again, keeping things more simple inside the equipment flight case. With my previous modules, I recorded audio through the output jacks. When I record from the TD50X, for these YouTube videos, I use the USB output of the module. That USB cable goes directly from the module to my laptop. For sending and receiving MIDI from my software to the module and back, I still use a simple Roland MIDI interface which is USB powered. So to summarize, I did not only downsize in the amount of pads, I also downsized in the amount of equipment. The software that I showed in part 9 of this series has had updates in the past 10 years as well. I made this software myself and for myself. I plan to add functions in the coming months, mainly to include a looping function. When that update is done, I will make a new video about the software. This will probably end up being part 13 in this series. Just like the software has had updates, I have updated the lighting of the drum kit as well. I already had LED strips at the front to shine light on my pedals. Last year I added LED strips to the curved pipes to shine light on my feet. If you have seen drum cover and medley cover videos, you know that I like to play different types of sounds with my pedals. So these LED strips are meant to help viewers see and hear what I play on my pedals. After I have added loop functions to my software, I would like to add a function to control lighting to my software as well. It would be great to integrate 2 RGB spots in my drum kit, one at either side. Firstly, I would like to be able to set a specific color and intensity for each song that I play. Secondly, I would like to be able to change color and intensity while playing using MIDI and DMX. I'm not sure how to do that right now, but that's a challenge I'd like to take on next year. If I manage to add these functions to my software, I will make a video about it. Well, we have come to the end of this first update video in which I have shown you the changes I made in my drum kit hardware in the past 10 years. But of course this is a never-ending process. For instance, I've been playing on this drawing table chair for over 20 years. It's end of life for sure. I bought this bar stool in an IKEA store that I like and I'm currently testing with my practice kit. In the next video I will dive into the Roland TD50X module. I will show you a few functions that make it a great module for me, but I will also point out a few shortcomings or possible improvements. I hope Roland will watch that video and take notice, so the next version of the module will be even better. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, and I will try and post a new cover or update video soon.